Supreme Court lets Trump's transgender military ban go into effect. The shutdown continues as lawmakers bring bills to open the government to the floor. And special counsel Robert Mueller is looking into the Trump campaign's ties to the NRA. It's Wednesday, January 23rd. I'm Kim Iverson, and this is the Left Daily News Podcast. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in here. Of course, I've got Reed on the line. You can find him on Twitter at, what is your handle, Reed? It's confusing. At
Red Reedmond. At
Red Reedmond, even though your name is Reed Redmond.
So flip the E's, yeah.
Yeah, switching the E's up. Okay, so at Red Reedmond, right?
You bet.
Yes, that's where you can find him on Twitter. And he is our main writer here for The Left and does all the research. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get into the show. All right. Supreme Court has let Trump's transgender military ban go into effect. This makes me sick to my stomach. But essentially what had happened, if you remember, there was the big hoopla about Trump putting into effect a transgender ban in the military, saying that basically if you were trans and wanting to transition, that you were not going to be allowed to serve unless you were willing to embrace your biological sex, I think is what it was. Something along those lines. Very, really unnecessary. All of these military leaders from the various branches of government came out and said, this isn't a problem. Like this, why are we making this a problem? It's not a problem. We don't have a problem with these service members. And so there's no need to turn it into this. But of course, out of just some moral ideology, the Trump administration decided to put a ban on trans people. And it was really just to, quite frankly, I think just to make a statement of, we don't accept you, you must be your biological sex. Just crazy stuff. So this went to court. After the ban went into effect, courts put a stop to it. And because people, of course, sued, and then lower courts in the federal circuit said, okay, we're going to put an injunction on this, which means you cannot actually implement this. Well, unfortunately, yesterday, the Supreme Court lifted the injunction that was keeping the ban from taking effect. So now this is going to allow the Trump administration to actually implement the ban. So they get to do their whole transgender troops ban, which is crazy. But it's not quite going into effect, I guess, because lower courts are still deciding on a couple of the provisions of the ban. And because of that, they can't really fully implement the transgender ban until everything in full has been decided on. Reed, do you understand this a little better than I do? It's confusing.
Yeah, so there were a bunch of injunctions, and so the Supreme Court lifted...
Okay, hold on. First of all, an injunction is just fancy language for a block, right?
Yeah, it's just while we're deciding this, there's a reasonable possibility that it'll be found unconstitutional. Okay, so while we're still deciding on this, we're going to block it.
Okay, that's what an injunction means. I know they use fancy, legal language. Just plain English is nice, all right?
Yeah, so there were a bunch of injunctions, and the Supreme Court lifted almost all of them. There's technically still one in place. It's a national injunction that would keep this from going into effect, but that's expected to also be lifted, I believe, by the judge who's deciding that case. So for all intents and purposes, the Trump administration will be able to put this into effect any day now.
Okay, so the injunction that they've got on one piece of this, so the ban that's still in effect, is going to be lifted by the judge. That's what's expected. And so then the military is going to be able to start putting forward this transgender troop ban pretty soon.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, right now we've got about 9,000 military members who identify as transgender. This ban will cause some to be discharged. Some will be protected. There are some exceptions. One of the exceptions is that if you were diagnosed with gender dysphoria after June of 2016, then you can stay as long as you don't have, I think, extensive medical treatment needed to transition. So it says here, I'm looking at this NPR article, it says this group will be allowed to receive required medical treatments to transition. Oh, I guess maybe they can. And serve in the preferred gender as long as they're not deemed non-deployable for more than 12 months. So that's for that'll apply to about 900 of the 9,000 active duty members of the military. Also, they say that there's a couple of groups that'll be able to stick around, and it's those who've been stable for 36 consecutive months. So if you've been stable for 3 years in your biological sex, So, okay. That does not include those who have been stable in their transition sex. So that's just for those who are in their biological sex. Also, those who've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria after beginning their military service but do not require a change of gender, they can stay. So as long as you're not asking for the surgery, you can stay. And those who the Pentagon calls transgender persons without a history or diagnosis of gender dysphoria and who serve in their biological sex. So if you've never been officially diagnosed, you might suspect you are trans, you definitely feel like you are, you just have never gone to a doctor to be diagnosed specifically with that, and you're serving in your biological sex, then I guess you can stay as well. It's really an attack on the transition, I feel like. Obviously it's an attack on all trans people, and this makes me particularly sick to my stomach for a couple of reasons, because one, being trans is hard enough. I mean, could you imagine that struggle? It's not easy. It's not like somebody just woke up and all of a sudden they were like, you know what? I want to make my life really hard and I want to be the other gender. I don't think any of us who are not trans have those feelings. I mean, it's just not something you wake up and decide. So it's already hard enough to struggle with this feeling. And one thing about the trans community is, because of that struggle, there's high rates of suicide, high rates of depression. So it's hard. It's a hard existence. And then on top of it, we see high rates of unemployment. People discriminate. They think that they're weird. They don't want to hire them. They feel, so the military is a job and it's a place to go, to belong, to make a living. So many trans people, unfortunately, the statistics show that they turn to types of professions that, really compromise their health and safety, like turning to prostitution or, the sex industry in general. And, because of the discrimination. So, having a job like this, being able to go to the military, to be proud of your job, to be accepted in a community, to fight for your country, and then to have this administration say, no, we don't even want you. We don't accept you. You're not welcome here. Even though these people are like, wait a minute, I've signed up to give my life to the country. I've signed up to fight. I'm doing my job. And so you're just going to fire me or you're not going to you're not going to hire me or you're going to fire me because you don't like the way I am. I mean, that has nothing to do with you at all. That is not a struggle you face. I mean, that just to me, honestly, it literally gives me a pit in my stomach. And I'm easily brought to tears. So this definitely is one of those things that does bring tears to my eyes. I just cannot imagine. So this is pretty sickening. Now, this was a 5-4 decision, right? So the 4 liberal justices said that they did not want this. Do we know how Ruth Bader Ginsburg is doing, by the way? She's alive, right?
She voted on this, so I think she's still working from home, and she's still working on cases, but while recovering.
I wonder when the vote was.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because, they do the vote, and then they write their opinions, so it takes them a while to do that before they release everything. But, yesterday was that big, not yesterday, but it was the day before. Was it the day before, or was it yesterday, where Fox News had that? Did you hear about that? Had that graphic?
2 days ago, yeah.
Yes, they flashed the graphic of Ruth Bader Ginsburg being dead. I mean, they had it was like 1933 to 2019, and they had her picture. And I mean, it made viewers think, oh my gosh, did Ruth Bader Ginsburg die? And the big question is, why did they even have this graphic loaded and ready to go? Why did they make the graphic? And then people said, well, they make the graphic because you always want to be ready just in case a prominent person dies. They've got these graphics for everybody. They've got obituaries ready for everybody. But look, I've been a professional broadcaster for a long time. You don't load something into the system like that. It doesn't live in the system like that. Maybe Fox News has a totally different system. I don't know. And maybe everything's just ready to go by a push of a button. But that was pretty alarming to me. And then it's alarming that, she's been working from home recovering, but I've been searching online, scouring for any statement from her or her people, and I haven't seen anything to retract this. I mean, Fox News says, from what we know, she's at home recovering. And that was like, what? That was a little weird statement, from what we know. And then I'm looking online and I can't find a single thing from anybody that actually verifies that she's okay. So I'm freaking out. So Hopefully she's okay. You think she's okay, Reed?
Yeah, I think she's okay.
Okay. I mean, it's not easy being 85 years old, and recovering from surgery and broken ribs and cancer surgery. So, I mean, anyway. So that's the story that's going on there with Trump's transgender troop ban. It's just disgusting. Anything else we need to know on that, Reed? Did I miss anything?
That's about it.
Okay, well, moving on to the shutdown. It is day 33, the longest by far in history, and really, there's no end in sight. I mean, we just don't see how this is going to end. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell did put, he is putting the bill on the floor. It's basically what Trump had said he wanted to do. So it was his announcement. Mitch McConnell packaged that up all nicely, and he's presenting it to the floor of the Senate. But the House, of course, is saying no way to that. So even if it does pass the Senate, which I'm not sure if it will, because I don't think Democratic senators are going to vote for it. But even if they did and it made it to the House, there's no way it's going to pass the House because of the large, clear Democratic majority over there. So the House is proposing their own set of a bill to open the government, and that includes everything they would like and no wall funding. So we're kind of at a stalemate from what I can see. Is that what you're seeing as well, Reed?
Yeah, I mean, both of these votes, they're being called show votes because they won't become law. They won't pass through the other chamber of Congress, and the Senate one might not even pass through the Senate. And the thing with Mitch McConnell introducing this bill now is he'd said up until Trump came forward with this proposal, he'd said that he wouldn't put a bill forward that he didn't think Democratic leaders and Trump would be on board with. And so now he's just doing a complete 180, as he is wont to do, and he's putting this on the floor of the Senate because it's Trump's idea, and he wants to try to put pressure on Democrats.
Yeah. I read that Trump has never vetoed anything.
No.
And so because of that... and it's really because of Mitch McConnell. He's protected the president. So he doesn't put anything on the president's desk that he wouldn't sign. So he's never had to veto anything, which is strange. I mean, we haven't had a president not veto something in how many years? 140 or something.
Yeah, crazy number. I think George W. Bush had one of his terms he went without doing a veto, but his entire presidency, his second term, he had a few.
Okay.
But yeah, Trump would be the first in a long, long time because he has Mitch McConnell out running interference. Oh, yeah. Mitch McConnell, Trump's biggest fanboy. So that's where we're at with the shutdown. Basically, we're nowhere. I mean, long story short, we're nowhere. All right, moving on here. Robert Mueller is looking into the Trump campaign's ties to the NRA. If you remember, the NRA spent about $30 million to help Trump get elected. And now it's looking like, according to some reports, that Mueller has been sniffing around and asking people some questions, and specifically about the ties to the NRA. And I think this still ties back to the Russians, doesn't it, Reed, in some way? Yeah. So during the 2016 election, actually in years before that, there was a Russian spy trying to infiltrate Republican circles by aligning with people in the NRA. So she was trying to cozy up to people in the NRA so that she could have some influence in the GOP. And so there's speculation, I won't jump to any conclusions, that somehow someone had infiltrated the NRA and was feeding dark money to Trump's campaign, and maybe that's why the NRA was so quick to align with Trump during his candidacy. I see. Okay. So they're talking about this Maria Butina. Is that her name? And she was Maria Butina was the one that wasn't she trying to create the NRA for Russia? That was her whole shtick. She was saying, okay, Russia needs the NRA because they're not allowed to own guns over there, I think. And so she was like, yeah, we're going to do that. And so she was apparently getting in with the NRA in order to, and that was her story, right? We're trying to develop a NRA in Russia. I guess so, yeah. Okay, so we'll see how that all pans out. I mean, this report hopefully will be coming out soon enough so that we could just put an end to everything that's going, whatever this report says. I mean, I'm just so curious at this point. Just tell me what it says, so we can move on with something in either direction. Either we move on and we just put up with Trump, or we move on, I guess, and impeach the guy. But I just want to know. I'm just ready. I'm ready. I think everybody's feeling that way. We're like, when is this coming out? March couldn't come soon enough. Some good news for you. Here's some interesting, fun news. But the Craigslist of weed. So this is called budtrader.com. I didn't know you could do this. Trade. I didn't either. Sell weed privately
online, apparently. I don't know, but I'm going to have to look into that. Budtrader.com. It's going to be my new favorite website. Has announced, I live in California, by the way. It's totally legal, so don't judge me. They've announced via Facebook that they're going to cover the cost for any government employees who are unable to pay for their medical cannabis due to the government shutdown. So they're kind of joining in. You know, there have been some other companies that have put up some pop-up shops like Kraft. They were feeding government employees at no cost. And it looks like budtrader.com is going to be giving away some weed to some of these government employees who are unable to pay for their medical cannabis. So, I think that's great as well. You know, cannabis is expensive. And if you are a person who is using cannabis for medical purposes, it's certainly a godsend. I know I have people in my life that use it for glaucoma, and it really, really helps them with the pressure in their eyes. And other people use it for nauseousness or for, I know, seizures it's good for. I mean, there's a lot of things that it's actually... It really does treat. I know people sometimes make it into a joke, like, yeah, right, you know, you need medical marijuana. But it really is for many people. So that's actually really good news. Speaking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you can buy an RBG-themed lipstick. It is called Bad Bitch Berry. That's the name of the color, Bad Bitch Berry. And it's sold by Lip Slut. They're calling it the Notorious RBG Lipstick. Half of the proceeds are going to civil rights organizations. So that's pretty cool. Also, Reed, do you want to tell us some ways that we can help these federal workers who are still going without any money? I mean, 33 days, that's a whole month of no money. Yeah,
so I was, looking for something that I could do, and I found this article on Refinery 29, and they put up some organizations. We have it laid out in the newsletter. They listed some organizations. There are some D.C. area food banks. One is called the Capital Area Food Bank that's taking donations.
I still think this is so crazy. It's a lunacy that these people who are working people have to go to a food bank to be fed because the government can't get its shit together. I mean, that's just lunacy to me. But okay, So you can support food banks like the Capital Area Food Bank.
You can do that. Mm-hmm. There's no actual federal assistance for families that need diapers. So there's a nonprofit called the National Diaper Bank Network that's giving diapers to federal workers, and you can donate money there. GoFundMe set up a government shutdown direct relief fund. And then obviously you can call your member of Congress, which is very free, very fast, very easy. Just Google my member of Congress and something will come up. You can give them a call.
I heard that someone is trying to pass, and this is something that I'm big on, ending government shutdowns forever. I mean, I understand we need to end this particular shutdown, but then what I would like to see is legislation go forward to end these shutdowns completely because they're not necessary. And I did a whole video on this on my website. If you go to KimIversonShow.com, you can watch this whole video. And I did post this as a podcast here. And I think somebody actually put forward legislation to...
Yeah, Senator Mark Warner did yesterday.
Really?
Did you hear what he called it?
No, what is it called?
The Stop Stupidity Act. And stupidity stands for shutdowns, transferring unnecessary pain, and inflicting damage in the coming years.
Yeah, that's exactly what shutdowns do. And they don't have to continue. So hopefully after this one ends... Congress will get its shit together and realize, this is a weapon we don't want anybody to use anymore because it's unnecessary. And if they just pass this, then hopefully there'll be actual change. What they just do is they put forward automatic continuing resolutions. So essentially when the government can't come to an agreement on the budget, which is what happens every single year, and we face this potential shutdown, they would just say, okay, the government continues to run at the previously agreed upon, the previous year's budget. And we just keep going at that level until we can come to an agreement, which to me makes the most sense. Why wouldn't you do that? Well, you wouldn't do that because you want to have this political weapon back and forth. And it's not fair to these 800,000 people. So I really hope that they do push forward with something after this whole debacle ends. If this debacle ever ends at this point, my God. All right, well, that's all the news that we've got for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Go to our website, theleft.com. That's where you can sign up for the newsletter. It is free. It gives you a roundup of everything that's going on. What you hear in this podcast, plus a lot more, is in that newsletter. And you can also watch this podcast as a video. You can also go to theleft.com. Otherwise, we will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.